The summer blockbuster season has come to an end. Therefore, I'm going to be ranking all 22 movies that I saw in the summer from the worst to the best. And I like a lot of these movies, so here's my ranking. In last place, Meg to the Trench. I went into this movie just wanting some dumb fun, and that's not what I got from this movie. Instead, I just got a dumb movie. It's oddly incompetent in the way the story is structured. It has all these ridiculous things happening, but plays it with a serious face. The Meg seems like a side creature in its own movie, as it's sidelined by, at the end, a bunch of sea creatures like a giant octopus and some dinosaurs show up at the end for no reason. I had no idea what was going on in the third act. And all of it to me was just stuff happening in chronological order, but I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about the plot that was happening. It just fails to do anything that to satisfy me that this is a good movie. I didn't enjoy this movie, so it comes in last. Number 21, The Mother. A totally bland, generic, and forgettable action movie. Now, another one I went in just expecting a fun and good, not good, but just a fun, decent action movie. And this movie is the most bland and generic film that I've seen in a long time. It is really, really generic and bland. But not only that, it tacks on every single action movie cliche stereotype that a bunch of action movies in the past have done before, and we've seen this sort of thing done better. Beyond that, some of the sequences are just shot a little bit weird, where they will just blur 2/3 of the screen to show that a guy's being tortured, when in the sequence Jennifer Lopez is torturing a guy.
Wow, that was weird.
And unfortunately, I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about anything happening. And so to me, there was absolutely nothing distinctive about this movie for me to enjoy. And nothing memorable either. Number 20, Crater. Now, there's not much for me to say about this movie because it is one of the most forgettable movies of the year to me. I went in not knowing what to expect, only that it was from some of the people that worked on Stranger Things. And it barely qualifies as an adventure film. It's basically just Stand By Me in space.
You mean nothing to me.
The plot doesn't move forward at all, and some of the choices with the plot, the twist at the end about the dad just didn't work, made the characters worse, and so just a forgettable film when it easily could have been a fun adventure movie about kids going across the moon. Number 19, Insidious the Red Door. Now, I really wanted to enjoy this movie a lot more than I actually did, but at the end of the day, I just couldn't recommend this film.
And you blew it!
And for a number of reasons. The plot, much like Crater, doesn't really move forward until the last 15-20 minutes of the movie, where it actually resolves some things, but for the most part, it loops around in circles, being jump scare after jump scare with nothing that really matters to the story. It plays like a mystery, but the twists and answers they reveal, in the context of the movie, the audience already knows what the twists and reveals are going to be. And so, while it had its moments, I really enjoy that Patrick Wilson was directing the movie, and I hope he does some more things in the future that are better than this movie. The script for this movie just did not work for me, and so as a newer Insidious fan, I went into this movie really excited and left the theater really disappointed. Next up is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and much like Insidious the Red Door, I am very brokenhearted that I have to have this movie so low on the list. But again, this is a movie I could not recommend, and it was just utterly disappointing to me.
Why are you the way that you are? I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
Now, it's not all that. It's fun to see Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones one final time. But other than that, I just don't think there's much for me to enjoy about this movie. It's only slightly better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Right off the bat, it's missing the charm of the 80s Spielberg movies. Even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had a little bit of 80s charm. This movie just erases all of that. Add to that, much like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they bring sci-fi elements into the Indiana Jones franchise, with this time travel being the plot of this movie. Some of the CGI is super ridiculous looking, especially the opening sequence in World War II. And unfortunately, not all the characters were very memorable in this film. And so, for me, this was a movie that I went in so excited, and it easily could have been really good. I think the franchise was better off ending at The Last Crusade. Number 17 is Heart of Stone. This is a Gal Gadot action thriller released on Netflix. And much like The Mother, it is just generic and forgettable the moment you leave watching it. Now, what does elevate this movie a few spots above The Mother is that I think, unlike that movie, it's entirely watchable. And I think Gal Gadot is more charming and fun in the action hero role than Jennifer Lopez. But in general, just not really much here to remember. We've seen these spy action thrillers done before and done much better. It just has nothing new to offer, but at least Gal Gadot's more fun than Jennifer Lopez, and at least it didn't lean into all of the action movie cliches. Next up, Transformers Rise of the Beast. An okay addition to the Transformers franchise, but I just feel like, much like a bunch of the other movies down on this list, it didn't do anything really memorable or for me with this film. And so what this movie tries doing is balancing the Michael Bay Transformers action, the chaotic action in those movies, along with the character moments on Bumblebee, but it doesn't have nearly as good characters as Bumblebee, as well as not nearly as better action as the Michael Bay movies. And so it's just kind of right there in the middle, and I feel like that really hurts the movie a little bit. The characters have arcs, but I didn't really care about the characters, and it just simply doesn't feel as big as the other movies. The final battle is literally in the middle of nowhere, and it kind of feels like a video game when opposed to a bunch of these other big gigantic blockbusters this summer. And so this is a movie where it's good enough, but it's just okay. Kicking off the top 15 is Haunted Mansion, and to be clear, I think I would go positive on every other movie on this list, and I would say I would recommend them, Haunted Mansion being one of those movies.
You did it! Congratulations!
And I think this movie is highly elevated by the cast and characters and the charm and charisma they bring on screen. It's kind of a spooky movie that's accessible to broad audiences. There's some nice laughs all throughout because the theater I was in was laughing out loud all throughout it. And it manages to have some arcs, heart, and emotion that you as the audience don't really care about in this movie. And I think your enjoyment out of this movie really depends on how much you like the Disney attraction. Because as somebody that's been on the Disney attraction several times, and has been to Disneyland many times because I live in California, I had some fun with the stuff they put in this movie. And so, it's just meant to be a small little fun family film. I wouldn't ever choose to rewatch this movie on my own, but for what it was worth, I thought it was fun. Next up is The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and this is a movie that is basically just Alien and Predator instead of Alien on a spaceship and Predator in the jungle. This time it goes with Dracula on a boat, and so I went into this movie wanting Dracula to kill some people on a boat, and I think it delivered on that. It contains the edge of your seat thrills you want from a horror movie like this.
We call him Dracula.
But it's not a perfect movie. I'd rather rewatch Alien or Predator. It feels at the very end like it's trying really hard to set up a sequel. Seems like a weird choice. It's a good enough Dracula film. I find it weird that Universal produced two Dracula movies in the same year, but it's good enough. It's entertaining. I wasn't bored while watching it, but it's not as good as you would hope it would be. Number 13, Fast X. The latest film in the Fast and Furious franchise is another stupid but fun film that I thought was actually a little bit of a return to form for the franchise after some so-so installments in the past. It's less cartoonish than some of the previous movies in the franchise, and it finds ways to continue plot lines and loopholes from previous movies in the franchise where you don't mind. I thought Jason Momoa was a nice addition to the franchise. He was a much more charismatic and fun villain than Cypher from the previous movies. The story is actually memorable and interesting, and there's a very interesting ending, to say the least. Now, of course, it's not perfect. I didn't love it. Like, there's certain characters that will get killed off in this movie that I don't buy it because we're watching a Fast and Furious movie. But at the end of the day, I went into the Fast and Furious movie expecting some ridiculous shenanigans, and I got that. And that brings us to The Little Mermaid. Now, this, I would say, is not a perfect Disney live-action remake, but I thought it was one of the better ones that we've gotten in these past few years, as it's a more enjoyable one that captures some of the charm of the original, especially through the lead actress that plays Ariel. We just capture the charm and the curiousness of Ariel perfectly. I think that the movie is very charming, with a nice set of characters that I all thought made it a fun movie, much like the original Little Mermaid. Now, there are some questionable CGI effects here and there. For a 2-hour and 15-minute film, it certainly didn't offer enough. It didn't really add anything new to the story to justify that large of a runtime. I will say it slows down at certain parts, but it's a movie that I thought was a nice remake of The Little Mermaid. Number 11 is The Flash, and from here on out, these are all movies that I really enjoy. This is like a B+ for me. And so, therefore, this and every other movie up here is a B+ or better. That just shows you how many really good movies I saw this summer. And one of them being The Flash. And ever since this movie came out, it has been very divisive and polarizing. But, to me, I'm one of the people who really enjoys this film. At its core, it's very relatable, as it tells a story about Barry trying to resurrect his mother, basically.
You lost both parents in one day.
And in doing so creates dire consequences for the timeline, multiverse, and all that stuff. And so, it's in general relatable because he lost a parent. That could be a very bad time in someone's life. Also, it's just really fun to see Michael Keaton return as Batman one final time. And I just thought, yet again, he did another good job at playing Batman. It pulls from great source material like Flashpoint. Now, of course, there is some questionable CGI in this movie, but that's only a minor complaint because I really enjoyed what they did with this film. Kicking off the top 10, Elemental, and it was kind of a fun experience for me seeing this movie, as I saw it with a bunch of my friends, and my mom took us with her, and she invited a bunch of her friends to watch Elemental, and so it was kind of a fun experience watching it. But the movie itself, I thought, was just a really nice return to form for Pixar that not only worked as an animated rom-com, basically, but also reminded me of why I love Pixar movies so much. Is that they have a nice charm, and they can be really funny when they need to, but it also contains a big emotional core to it, and that's what I really enjoyed about this film, and I hope Pixar does this type of thing more often in their future. There's some nice creative and cool animation that comes with it.
Why does anyone get to tell you what you can do in your life?
Now, the movie itself is not as strong as some other great Pixar movies, but I think Pixar is starting to return to form with this film. Number 9 is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, and I just thought this was a fantastic 21st century adaptation of the Turtles that puts the Turtles in the 21st century, and they really feel like teenagers from this particular time period. Also, I think the themes about fitting in just work better in this movie and make it easily the best of the theatrically released Turtles movies. There's some nice emotional currents and arcs for characters. It's very, very humorous. And it, of course, has a highly creative animation style where it's kind of hand-drawn combined with computer animation technology. Now, I didn't find the antagonist all that interesting. And there's some specific dialogue, specific bits of humor that only kids in like 2023, teenagers like me, will understand. But I just thought that this was a great Turtles movie in the year 2023. Next up is Extraction 2. And this is what I want my Netflix action movies to be like. On a plot level, it's not really all that distinct, much like The Mother and Heart of Stone. But what really elevates this movie is that it's a simple rescue mission. It's executed right, and more importantly, it has some fantastic action sequences. One of my mind-blowing action sequences of all time right now is the sequence in this movie where they do a one-take action sequence that lasts 20 minutes. And that is insane to me. Where the stunt work, the action, it's all on display. Sam Hargrave, who's a stuntman himself, directed this movie, and you could just see that he loves action movies and he likes directing action movies. It's also, for a streaming movie, feels very large in scale for it being a simple rescue mission. And so, these are just movies that are such good action movies, and I cannot believe they're not theatrically released.
Wow, it looks great.
Number 7 is Sound of Freedom, and while this movie has some very dark subject matter, it's a very effective and emotional film for me that manages to have a very bleak tone. It's very horrifying with the things they show on screen, but it manages to effectively explore what we live in, known as this harsh reality. And so therefore, when people are in danger, you feel it.
Because God's children are not for sale.
When people are on victories, there's a sense of triumph. There's always a sense of hope. It's not like it's a fully bleak film, because it's always hopeful in certain scenarios of this movie. It doesn't at all fantasize the terrible actions of these people. It just shows you the harsh reality in which we live in. Now, because of that, it's not a very rewatchable film, but an effective and a very good film that grossed a bunch of money. Number 6, Blue Beetle. And this movie is certainly a more small scale and very simple DC superhero movie, or superhero movie in general, that we've gotten in a long time. But I think that's why the movie works and why it's the best DC movie of the year thus far. Is that it's very small scale.
I got family.
It doesn't have to rely on all the big shoulders of carrying these multiverse stuff. It can just tell a story and has a great theme about family with characters that you actually care about. It's also a really funny movie. Like, all the characters or actors just give it their all. In particular, the lead from Cobra Kai, I just really thought he did a good job in this movie. And so, while this might not be the biggest blockbuster superhero movie, it's excellent done through simplicity. Kicking off our top 5, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Just a fantastic and a return to form for the MCU, as it's a very straightforward story, but it just, whatever James Gunn was able to do with this movie, it's such an emotional conclusion to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and dives into the idea that every single one of these characters is broken as individuals, especially Rocket and his backstory and what they do with him. I just love all that stuff.
Really is good to have.
Back in the cage, P13.
Add to that, you get the best villain of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, who is somebody you absolutely hate. There's some great action sequences, and while it's very dark, it can have some great laughs all throughout.
Okay. Now what? Open the fucking door!
Now, it's not a perfect movie. It very much is what the MCU needed with a bunch of disappointing projects here and there. I thought Adam Warlock was a little bit wasted. I thought his characterization, the villain's characterization, was a little bit weak as he's just this flat character. In general, thoroughly enjoyed what they did with this movie. 4. Gran Turismo. 2023 seems like a great year for movies based on true stories and video game movies, because this is a great movie based on a true story and a great movie that's an adaptation of a video game that manages to be very interesting and compelling, as it's a plot about a teenager who plays the video game Gran Turismo, and then he grows to become an actual racer, and that's very interesting and compelling.
I've raced this track 1,000 times in the game.
But it actually has likable characters that you care about. It draws out some big emotions, so when there's a victory, you feel it. When there's a loss, you feel a sense of hopelessness and dread, but yet it still manages to be a fun, sweet, and heartfelt film all at the same time. In third place, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and this movie absolutely lived up to all the hype. I saw the original Spider-Verse in the theater and I loved it, and this movie just managed to be something special, in particular with its animation and its unique comic book styles, its unique styles it uses for the backgrounds, the characters, everything like that. It really exceeds in the animation quality. But beyond that, it explores the loneliness of Spider-Man and the toll that being a superhero takes on these people. Also, there's just some incredible Easter eggs here and there where every Spider-Man film will be pointing out all these different things, and it manages to be very emotional and a personal film that's a character-based story. Now, a lot of people are going to be putting this one at number 1. I can't say I could put it there quite yet because of such a hard cliffhanger at the end.
You want in?
But in general, thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and I can't wait for the sequel. Our runner-up is Oppenheimer. Now, I'm a massive Christopher Nolan fan, and he makes another great film yet again, and this time it's a fascinating story about J. Robert Oppenheimer and the creation of the atom bomb, but it has all the complexity of the Nolan films, but also just has really compelling historical figures like Oppenheimer, who's not a perfect man, who didn't set out to cause the deaths of millions of lives, but the toll that takes on him and the bombings that happen. And so therefore it's a story that it's very victorious at times, but you can't really celebrate with the characters because you always feel this sense of dread that something really bad is going to happen. And it also just contains so much tension throughout it in different ways that big gigantic blockbusters do. It doesn't need to rely on the characters being in danger to have tension. It has the audience's knowledge of the history that happened, and therefore builds off of that to create this very tense atmosphere. I loved this movie, and I can't wait to see what Christopher Nolan does next. But in first place for me, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And this to me is currently the best of the Mission Impossible franchises. Maybe my favorite action movie of the 21st century, and maybe one of the best movies of the 21st century. And what this movie does so well is that it manages to have the urgency and danger that you want from a Mission Impossible movie, but also have more personal stakes that tie back to Ethan Hunt. You can feel the danger, therefore it can lead to some very emotional moments in this film. Every single character stands out. much like Ethan Hunt and or old characters like Benji and Ilsa, but you also get Grace, played by Haley Atwell, who just plays off of Ethan Hunt so well, and it solidifies to me Tom Cruise could really outdo himself with his action, his stunts. There are several fantastic action sequences in this movie, and with a year filled with part ones and cliffhangers, I much prefer my cliffhangers being done like this and have a satisfying ending while still being a cliffhanger than the way it's done in Fast X and Across the Spider-Verse. This is everything I wanted from a Mission Impossible movie, as well as an action movie in general.
So good.
So it is my favorite movie of the summer. There you have it. That's my ranking of all 22 movies I saw in the summer. Down below in the comment section, share your ranking of every summer blockbuster you saw in 2023. Over on my channel, I have more content like this. Check those out right now. And click that like button and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. I will see you in the next one.